How you guys doing? Hey, I dig the background. Holy cow.
Yo, we're actually pretty new with the Zoom stuff because we had just started the podcast back in November, so we're learning as we go here. But yeah, no, this is actually in like the Zoom preferences settings.
I was wondering about that because I've been on some calls at work with people, like just suppliers or whatever, and they'll have this galaxy spinning in the background. I'm like, whoa, what's this guy into, you know? But I guess that's just part of the software now. That's how it is.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they have like you could put facial hair and change your eyebrows now. It's that whole like deep fake stuff is starting to even come into Zoom.
That's wild, man. I've seen like my friends start sending me pictures like, oh, this is what I would look like if I was a girl. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, why would I want to see that? No, but it's cool. I mean, the technology is amazing. It is.
Yeah, it's appreciation of technology, you know, as long as it's not used for the wrong reasons, like we know.
Most of the time it does.
Kinda.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think I use it for a good reason, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we are, especially us, man. Come on now.
Right.
The truth community does use it for good reasons.
Yeah. So what inspired you to start the podcast recently then? Was this something you were kind of into before? Or?
Well, actually, like probably around 8-9 years ago when I watched, well, actually, dude, it goes back to when I was 15. This was 2005. Whatever year Loose Change came out, that's what got me thinking the way I think. Okay. Then Zeitgeist came on, saw Zeitgeist, loved astrology from there on out. And then just from 2012 on, like wrote out a Dark Night of the Soul. 6-7 years stuck at the same job, doing the same shit. Like something was blocking me from doing what I want to do. I'm also a musician. So I started trying to really push for it. And then because I had studied for so long, and Gio, my colleague here, he had started working at the job that I was a boss at. So we just would hang out on weekends. And then we were in a car one night and we were like talking about religion and astrology and all this other stuff. And we're like, dude, let's throw on the voice memos and see how it comes out. And
right on.
We liked it. And then 2 years later, that was 2 years prior to when we started it back in November. So, and then we finally just sucked it up. The pandemic was going on. And then we just followed through with it. So
sure. Yeah. I mean, now is the time, right? It's like, you realize that it's starting to impact our lives now, like this shit that we see. And, you know, for years, I actually started to question why I was doing this. You know, I had been doing it for 3 or 4 years by the time 2020 rolled around. And honestly, by the end of 2019, I was kind of done with things. Like I was ready to kind of pack it in. Like, I'm kind of tired of this. I want to move on, but it was still interesting to me and I was still learning. And then the pandemic happened and I was like, oh yeah, okay, now this is serious again, you know? And
yeah. I mean, perfect time for you guys too. I mean, I know a lot of the like specific stuff, like you stay within Gematria and then you use astrology, right? So it's a perfect time for things like this to really flourish too. So you think like the world's turned off, but actually it's turned on for people like you and me and Gio.
Sure. And I was just saying to a friend of mine before this too, it's almost frustrating because it feels like these riddles get simpler and simpler. And it's as if like I want to let it go sometimes. And I want to ignore these news stories. But then I glance at it and maybe it's a matter of having been so seasoned in it, like being so used to this and knowing what to look for. But it feels like everything pops out immediately. And I was like, I can't ignore it. You know, so for me, you know, not only did this all happen, but I kind of called it more or less. Like I made very, very few predictions in my posts. Like you can go through my blog and you can get a handful, maybe less than 10 of posts where I actually predict something. And I have posts where I'm like, hey, 2020 for 3 years. I'm like, 2020 is the year where something big is happening. And it's got to do with the numerology of revelation. Well, COVID-19 matches revelation in Gematria. And this is the first multiple of 1010, the revelation Gematria 2020. So like I knew I was onto something, especially with eclipses too. And then not only was it by the numbers of the eclipse code, but they called it the coronavirus, like corona, like what you see during the eclipse. So they just throw these things out there and it feels like, like, man, I was so right, you know, and I just didn't know what I was seeing before it happened, but I knew something was coming. And, you know, through numerology, you can get kind of more clues to it, or at least narrow it down, it seems.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of questions for you. It's why we wanted to get you on, because we feel like this area of numerology and gematria is not, I mean, you have you, and obviously we know Zach. So, and I remember I saw your video with the response to him. And why I'm bringing that up is because I loved your whole take. And nothing to do with between you guys, but your take on the organic side to gematria.
Yeah, it's wild. And yeah, I mean, that was me kind of like trying to like, Zach was slapping me up on his channel with his voice, and I was kind of slapping him up with some numbers like, hey, just so you know, you're part of this too. Like, whether you're conscious of it or not, we're part of this as well, man. And it's not like you're just a guy in your house. Like, you are in the mass public consciousness, dude. And because of that, you have to be coded somehow. And
Right.
he's the one who points out, born on the coldest day ever recorded. What are the odds of that? I mean, that guy is like, yeah, there's something crazy about it. And even now he said, oh, he made this video about me and it's a stupid video. It's like, dude, you just, I want him to get it. You know what I mean? And, I think he is a little bit, he's softened up. We had a little rough exchange a few weeks ago. And, we both called each other names. It was good fun. We all had a good time. And, I sent him my like most basic eclipse post. And I was like, here, dude, like, they had this glacier burst in India, in this state that no one's heard of. But that tiny little state in India is where the annular eclipse reached maximum eclipse just this past year. And now we get a news story exactly 33 weeks later. And I'm like, that's the eclipse number. So I was like, here, dude, this is as simple as it possibly gets. And if you can't get this, then I give up. And then all of a sudden in his next video, he's like, oh, by the way, this story is connected to the lunar eclipse. And shout out to Derek and the eclipse code. I'm like, oh, okay. He sees now,
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I wanted. Is not, and I didn't care about waking him up. For him to call me names, I could give a shit. All I want is for what I'm pretty sure I've discovered, which is significant, to be shared. And, if he's not sharing it, fine. At least people are coming to my channel. That's great. But for him
I actually didn't know you just from his channel either. I was doing deep searches on YouTube for this.
Right on.
And it's the reason why. That's what I'm saying. Like, there wasn't really much to find. You and you and Zach are the only two that are really pushing for this work. There's other people. Obviously, it's starting to grow, but I feel like this is, the astrology community, right? It's such a big community, but yet this is such a big part of it. And it's not focused on ever. So that's why I do find your work rather important.
Yeah, and all I wanted from Zach is to not tell people that my work was bad or irrelevant, because it's like, dude, this is basically your work, but connected to the rest of the Kabbalah, which Gematria comes from. Like, if you look at the Kabbalah and you start practicing numerology, they would consider it blasphemy to not also pay attention to astrology. Like, you can't do one without the other. All these rituals. I mean, if I don't talk about astrology in the video, it's because I missed it. I think.
Right.
You guys are part of the same community, so it being part of this like truth community, it's almost like there's got to be some sort of cooperation. You know what I mean? Like, especially if that's the main goal too, is to try to get people to understand and wake up and stuff, to kind of bash somebody else over ego and stuff. It just, I see that as defeating the purpose.
Right. And, it's like, we don't necessarily have to work together. Like, I don't even know if either of us want to work with each other. I mean, look at the Beatles. They broke up. They didn't want to work with each other. The two guys from Mythbusters, they can't stand each other. I look at those situations and I'm like, look, you got two of us who we're both into the same study, but we both have different perspectives. He wants to push what he discovered, which is fascinating and mind-blowing and amazing. I want to push what I discovered, which I think is fascinating and mind-blowing. And people tell me it's amazing too. So, the thing is, like, there's so many connected portions to this. And of course, life itself is connected in every sense, it seems. But, there has to be a point where I stop my decode and like go do something else. And I realize, like, as long as I want to keep decoding an event, I can keep going. I can keep going all day, all night, the next day, probably come back and find more. So there's like a point where I'm like, okay, I got to stop. And I just got to focus on my niche, primarily the eclipse code, because it's the most obvious part of astrology. And then, sprinkle in everything with the planets from there, I guess.
Yeah. Ironically, my birthday is the eclipse this year, May 26th. It's my birthday.
Oh, that's the super revelation date. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, dude, this year has been huge with astrology. I follow now. We're both actually very deep into the astrological studies. We love it. We like all the occult. Our podcast is actually literally about everything to do with the occult and even psychology and stuff like that. But astrology is a really, really big part of it. And all year I have Mars over my sun right now. I have the North Node's going to be over my sun this year. And the eclipse, of course. And then my ascendant is actually Sagittarius, 1 degree, which is 4 degrees away from the eclipse as well. So my sun is 5 degrees Gemini, absolute opposite. And then my ascendant is 1 degree of Sagittarius. So I have a big year. I've felt it all year. And I'm living proof, man. Like astrology, when you understand it correctly, and I guarantee this applies to numerology. And I actually have a cipher for you. I'm not great at numerology yet, but I'm getting there because I'm a 5, and there was something to do with the 5 this year. But consider
not to interrupt you, but to hear you're a Gemini, like that doesn't surprise me at all. Like I'm a Gemini. My research partner Bobby Simpson, a Gemini. Rambo, who's also on Zach's show, a Gemini. The guy who's helping me with the website, who jumped in, he actually met a girl on my Discord server and got married. He's a Gemini. And then my other research partner is a Virgo, the other Mercury sign. So, and then you're a Gemini too. So this doesn't surprise me. Like this is the manifestation of astrology. I mean, Gemini being the planet of communication and messaging. And that's exactly what all of us are trying to do. That's why we're drawn to this, is because that Mercury energy is so strong. And it's like, how does it work? Why does it work? I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but it does.
Yeah, we actually did. Get this. We follow Rick Levine, and I take Astrology Hub classes and stuff. And he had an episode. There's 2 people specifically, Rick Levine, and I can't pronounce. There's a Russian astrologer, and she did a book on the physics. And it's all electromagnetism and how it works. Like, the moon affects water on the earth, right, of the tides. And we're 80-90% salt water. So of course it's going to affect us. And people have a hard time kind of understanding that. But then when you really break it down, that's usually the one I give people. And when you do it that way, you realize, look, everything is connected and it's this etheric web and we are all connected. And you're right. This is a manifestation of all that. Geo is actually a Virgo rising. So his chart is also ruled by Mercury.
Ruled by Mercury. Yep.
Well, there you go. And I was going to say, like, Geo, just by his disposition over there, reminds me of the Virgo friend of mine, where he's kind of silent and like smiling, but he'll have his say. Yeah, like he'll have his say, and his stuff will probably be really interesting when he speaks up. But it's like just processing maybe right now.
Yep, I called it out perfectly. Yep.
Yeah. He's a Taurus sun, so there also is that. Yeah, sitting bull stature.
Conservative.
Right on. Yeah, I have a brother who's a Taurus. My nephew, a Taurus. Yeah, a lot of Taurus in the family.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I really find it important to understand both, man. And that's why I wanted to have a talk with you about it. And crazy, real quick, let me just throw in that 5 thing, because this could probably kind of break off into the Gematria conversation. I'm a 5 myself, life path.
I mean, like your life path? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my life path number is 5. You also have, actually, you know what? I have the list. But so I'm a Bucks fan, by the way. So what?
Okay, right on.
And I'm like purebred Bucks fan. I'm not.
What about the Brewers?
Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah.
No, I'm not so baseball. I stopped watching years ago. I don't know why, but I stopped watching it. But I'm a huge Bucks fan.
Right on.
So I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet. And I'm fascinated by it. So the last time the Bucks won the Super Bowl was a 5-year. It was 2000.
The Bucks won the Super Bowl?
Yeah, man. Come on now. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it. Right. I wouldn't believe it if I told you right now if I didn't watch football. Tom Brady's my quarterback, Leonard Fournette, all this other crazy stuff that goes on. But I actually can't. There we go. All right. So hear me out on this. So the Bucks win the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl 55.
There's the Buccaneers. I thought you meant the Milwaukee Bucks.
No.
Here, I thought you meant I thought you were talking about the Milwaukee Bucks the whole time. I'm like,
no, you know what it is?
What? This is so random. All right.
Well, hear me out. So this is why. So I'm a Bucks fan, right? And
Buccaneers.
You don't meet Buccaneers, Tampa Bay.
Right.
And I've been a Tampa Bay Bucks fan since I was like 8 years old. And the way I had become a Bucks fan was my dad's a Jets fan. Keyshawn Johnson left. I was tired of losing all the time. So Keyshawn dips. He goes to a Pirate team. I'm 8 years old. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. All right, I'm a Bucks fan. Just to state that I'm organically a Bucks fan. So, and same thing with the Warriors for basketball. So anyway, Super Bowl 55, there's 2 5s in it. Then you have 2021, which is a 5-year. They win the Super Bowl. 2003 was the last time they won a Super Bowl. That's a 5-year, right?
True, yeah. Yep.
The North Node was also in Gemini in 2003 when they won the Super Bowl, just like it is right now. The Bucks were the 5th seed in 2021. The Bucks won by 5 in the NFC Championship against the Packers, 31-26. Bucks had 5 sacks in the NFC Championship. Bucks win the division round against the Saints, equal to 5, 30-20, 3 + 0 + 2 + 0. They won the Super Bowl on February 7th, which is a 5-day in numerology. Brady was pressured dude, I took all these notes. Brady was pressured 5 times in the Super Bowl, earns his 5th Super Bowl MVP. We're the 5th wild card team. I'd said that. They only lost 5 times in the season. Let's see. Right, I said I'm a 5 numerology. I have a whole list, dude. And I've been like I said, I follow you guys, and I'm like, all right, this is probably kindergarten stuff, but isn't there a relevance to that?
Well, I think there could be. Absolutely. I mean, to me, all of this numerology stuff represents that we're on some sort of wavelength, right? And there's a number of these wavelengths, whether it's 60, 12, or who knows. But by having numerology tied to one of those wavelengths, we're going to be particularly susceptible to those in the future. So maybe it wasn't the Buccaneers necessarily that you were really gravitating to. Maybe it was the 5 on a deeper level. But the way that 5 was manifesting up, it just kind of had a way of drawing you to it. Because, I mean, look at the same thing with me, and I've done videos on it where I talk about how my name matches Gematria. Like, my first name matches numbers, my last name is letters. And here I'm teaching the Gematria, which is a combination of numbers and letters. Like
that 26?
What's that?
Was the number 26 that you're talking about throughout one of the ciphers?
No. So my first name equals 43, 92, and 25.
Okay.
Or 29. And then numbers is 43, 29, 92. And then my last name is 99 and 90. Letters is 99 and 90. And then my name, Derek Tikkuri, is Gematria, 142. Gematria is 142 in reverse. And my full name matches reverse Gematria in Latin Gematria, 1198. And nobody was looking at reverse Gematria before I came along and just decided to kind of look at it. Like, I was just built a calculator. I'm like, well, maybe there's an ordinal cipher backwards. And I'll start looking at it. And I started noticing things that were pretty interesting. And Zach saw the same. And boom, we were teaching reverse. So, yeah, it's like, am I drawn to Gematria or am I drawn to the numbers of Gematria? And it just happens to be about numbers. I don't know. But
the language of the matrix, you're saying.
Yeah. So like the Brewers, right? I mean, there's several teams in Wisconsin, but I mentioned the Brewers because I was always a huge Brewers fan. Like, something about baseball. I grew up with my parents always taking me to the stadium, sitting in the outfield. Like, there's just something magical about it. And for the Brewers to win the World Series, it would like make everything, right? And even though I say like sports championships are rigged and stuff like that, like, I'm still rooting for them. Damn it,
Same, dude. Same. I get it.
Yeah, it's like the only thing going on.
It's like the WWE for me now. It's like, all right, if it's set up, it's set up. But like, I'm still.
It really is. Yeah. So, but you look at the Brewers and you realize Brewers has the same Gematria as my last name, Tikkuri, 99 and 90. So I'm like, but the Packers don't have the same Gematria as my name. The Milwaukee Bucks don't have the same Gematria as my name, but the Brewers do. And I was always a big baseball fan. So what was it that I was drawn to? Was it their numbers? Was it the game? Who knows?
So is that like your root reason for getting, like, what really kind of got you interested was just the numbers and the connections and repetition? That's what got you into like really going into Gematria?
Yeah, well, I guess I got into it at like different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Are we recording, by the way? Because I feel like this is all good stuff.
Oh,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
no,
cool.
we've been recording. Trust me.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I got into Gematria on different levels, not that dissimilar from what Ray said. So when I was 19 in 2004, and I got my first job, and I had jobs before this, but this was like my first serious job at a bank. And one of the bankers there introduced me to Alex Jones, and this was all new to me. All I knew is that 9/11 was weird. Like, I was in the classroom that day, and we got to the TVs really late. We were like the last class to watch. But as we tuned in, one of the towers had already collapsed. And we're looking at it, and I'm like, where'd the tower go? I'm like, oh, it must have fallen. It must have collapsed. I'm like, why? Because like, oh, the plane hit it. I'm like, where? So it fell over sideways, and it's like, no. I was just like, it didn't make sense to me. That's all I'm saying.
I was 15, or dude, I think I was in sixth grade. So what is that, 13? And even as a 13-year-old, I'm like, why? How did they both fall like that?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was a sophomore that year, I think, or no, junior, 16. And the timing of 9/11 in my life too was really strange. It was like less than a month after I had seriously fallen in love with this girl who I wasn't even dating at the time. It's just like I didn't decide for it to happen. I just woke up one day and my life had changed, you know. And then the only day I ever saw her at school was on 9/11. She was there to pick someone up and something, and there it was. And then I look at her numerology; it all connects to the moon. 9/11. It's like, oh, okay, this is deep. But I didn't get there for a while. So back in 2004, it made sense to me. I was like, okay, this was a stage show. I didn't quite know how they pulled it off. I didn't know about this Alex Jones guy, but and I still don't. But it was very fascinating, and I felt like I had woken up to something, you know. And but you know, at the time, it was like I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't wrap my head around the grandness of it, and I had to focus on myself. I didn't go to college. I mean, I basically dropped out of high school. My mom homeschooled me to finish that up, and I just worked temp jobs until I got hired into other gigs, you know. So you know, I focused on getting a job. I actually moved to California to become a musician myself, and I was doing electronic music at the time. I wanted to do film scores and games and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, and I got out there and I was like, something is wrong out here. Like, I didn't like driving in LA. I didn't like, some of the people were really cool, but then some of the people were really awful.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if this environment's for me, man. Like, I don't like dodging snakes. I don't even like being around it. You know, money was never really the big goal for me. It was more just playing the music that I was making. Like, that's what I wanted to do. So I only lasted a few months out there. I was like, I'm out of here, man. I went back home, got a job through a temp agency, and now I'm working through GE Healthcare, like through that chain. So I've been able to hold that job, and now, you know, we're all working at home. So fortunately, I'm afforded a little extra time to work on the videos and whatnot. But yeah, like, you know, I didn't really do much. I was in a relationship from 2008 through 2016. And during that time, towards the end of the relationship, I started to wake back up, you know, like I knew the news was biased. I knew there was lies going on and stuff and corruption, but I didn't realize how insane it really had gotten. So 2015, the Charleston church shooting, which I just brought up in my video today, I started thinking, you know, when I was watching the news, I'm like, I get that the news is biased, but it definitely feels like they're trying to make me think something. And here you have one incident, and all of a sudden racism in America is an issue. It's like, this is 1/330 millionth of the country. And, you know, they're zooming in on his face, and his name is Dylan Storm Roof. And Dylan stormed the roof, like the church, you know, and I'm like, this is weird. So I went online and I'm like, what's going on with these stories, you know? And I started to see that people still thought Sandy Hook was fake. And I remember seeing the videos at first. I remember thinking it was strange, but I was like, no way, that's fake. That's insane. So I saw that people were serious about this, and I'm like, okay, this is out of control. Like, I'm going to try and prove these people right, because if I can't, then it's a new adventure for me, right? So what I did is I downloaded the Sandy Hook police reports. It's all publicly available. It's like 2-3 gigabytes. You get hours and hours and hours of police footage, dash cam. You get all the sworn testimony, all the photographs, everything. And I'm pouring through this because at the time I knew nothing about numerology. This is just me trying to, you know, see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm not a conspiracy researcher. I just happen to be a person who researches into things that turn out to be conspiracies. And when you look at the Sandy Hook police report, you realize every chance that those videos had to show you some evidence that there were hundreds and hundreds of kids pouring out of the school, they went to the max lengths to hide that. So for 15, 20 minutes during the evacuation period, all the dash cams that are showing that just go blue. It's all redacted. Everything is redacted. And all you ever see is a few kids. There should be hundreds of parents, you know, and they're just walking in circles around this firehouse. I'm like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. It started to really, really bother me.
Like,
because I'm like, oh my God.
You're thinking like there should be chaos. There should be things going on where there's panic and like there's actual emotion. And I got the same vibe where there was this lack of emotion or a lack of, you know, energy to the situation. Everything was very like, you know, for what it was.
Right. I was expecting people sprinting down the street, full speed.
Right.
Like, where are my children?
Yeah.
You didn't see that. You just saw casual stuff. And so the more I looked into it, and then you see like David Wheeler, you know, the good guy's got the big mole on his face. Dude was like, he's a dad of a fallen child, but he was also like dressed up in military gear at the school that day. And then they had the footage with the guy running from the school. I said, okay, you know, it took about 2 weeks for me, but I was like, I had convinced myself after reading all this, I was like, this isn't right. It smells so bad. It smells so wrong. I see no evidence of anything. By the way, in one of those photos, there's a gunshot. Supposedly, Adam Lanza shot himself in the head while wearing a hat. And there's a picture of the hat with just a gun hole, but no blood. And it's like, oh my God, this is so bad.
Just like the whole passport thing with 9/11, where it's like you feel like they put in props, you know. If it was a setup there, like honestly, could they do a little better? I think you or me or anybody who started asking questions that didn't start out really as a conspiracy theorist, because normal human beings are going to think other human beings are good or okay. Like, right. I think everyone has a natural niche to say, hey, I'm going to think other people are good because I'm a good person, you know. But when you ask simple questions like, how the hell could a passport survive that, but no people or whatever, and then on top of that you have something like a bullet hole with no blood, and it actually goes in line with the rapper, the XXX rapper, how there was no broken glass, but then later on when they were towing the car, there was a thing over the glass that was broken. They never broke the. Right. If you watch the actual camera footage, the window was open the whole time. There was no blood either for those. So it's like, of course we're going to ask questions. We're not conspiracy theorists. We want to know the truth.
Yeah. Well, and this opens the door to a whole bunch of theories as far as, you know, they're dropping hints. They drop clues. They make it seem obvious that these things are truly hoaxes. So, you know, to some degree, you feel like I feel almost certain, or I do feel certain that there's intentional clues, like whether it's not just stooping to light. Like they're trying to drop hints there. And I can't help but wonder, like, do they want the intelligent people of society to have a leg up based on this knowledge and not be afraid? Because, you know, like we said, it's all energetic, right? And when you have people who buy into the fear, which is essentially what they're selling now on TV 24/7, you have people living in this lower vibrational state, and they don't question things so much. You know, they're just living in this survival state. And when they're thinking day-to-day survival, they're just going to work. They're just getting by. They're just surviving. They're not thinking about how to get ahead, how to maybe make more money for themselves. So this fear element, you know, do the elite and powerful play on that to keep those people they feel are intellectually inferior, to keep them down in that state as permanently as possible? And they see people like me sharing this stuff, people like me and Zach, and they're like, well, okay, it's okay if some people see this because some people are going to get it naturally, whatever. But you realize when it gets to the point where, you know, a certain percentage of people, I don't know what it is, I guess Zach's channels are getting to like, you know, 70, 80,000 or so subscribers before they're finally dropping the hammer.
Yeah, and they smack them back down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's just a certain limit to what we're allowed to share. And so in what I'm getting at is that people who are find this work ultimately kind of have to look for it. Like you have to be on this path almost to find it and to understand it. Because if someone just brings this up to you with no understanding of secret societies, and this is still my challenge to this day, is trying to talk to people who have no concept of Freemasonry, the Society of Jesus, the history of the Catholic Church and stuff like that. Trying to teach them numerology, it's like, I mean, you might as well be taking a plastic hammer to a brick wall, because there's no foundation there.
Well, another thing, let me throw this in there because I've noticed this, right? Because I have a lot of people, like all three of us, I guarantee we have people that surround us that aren't woke or whatever you want to call the word, aware, conscious. And when they say, I show Zach's video to certain people, and Zach's amazing, dude. Like the fact that he remembers what he does, same thing with you too. I'm not gassing him up either, or like just him. But the thing is,
he's good.
Oh, he's amazing, dude. He's amazing. Saying same thing goes to you. I think you deserve more recognition. And so if I show somebody the videos and say, I'm going to use Zach as an example, where he says the Jesuits 100 times and he starts belting this knowledge in to people's heads, like we're going to understand it. We understand that that's obviously part of the big picture because we understand the deeper part of these stories. But a lot of my buddies, if they're watching, I'll get texts in the middle of the night going, the Jesuits, and they start to mock it. And it's only because yes, Zach would call them stupid, or idiots or whatever. And I'm with it, more so ignorant, but I think we have to find a better way to approach people, the simpletons of this knowledge, meaning that we have to really, that's why we're doing the podcast. We want to break down the simple parts of how this could even be a reality. If someone doesn't understand frequency, energy, vibration, and they consider this stuff just deep conspiracy for us internet heads, like there has to be a way to approach. And I think a lot of it too it's going to come down to us banding together and figuring out ways. Zach's trying to do it. And I think, obviously we're trying to do it, and we want to try and get as many people as we can on this show and to discuss these things so we can get multiple perspectives. But the thing is we have to band together and maybe create, like he has the free to find truth or whatever, or something like that. We're going to need our own platform eventually, is my point. Make it easier to come to us one place where all of us truth seekers in the community is sitting at. So
yeah, I agree, and I wish I could be more of an authority on deciding how to do that, but I tend to be.
It's not easy.
No, I mean, when I spend, I've had a lot of obsessions over my life, but this one has lasted the longest, and I've spent the most time on it. And at this point, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. I don't know if I've spent that much time on it, but I certainly feel like I'm pretty well versed in it. Like, it's a language. I mean, people, start learning Japanese, they still can't speak it well fluently after 2 or 3 years or whatever. And numerology, honestly, I don't know how much different that is, because to me, there's an underlying ability, a talent that some people really don't have to make connections with certain numbers and have that memory. So me, I consider myself blessed with a photographic memory. And I guess the best example of that was that in school, I won almost every single spelling bee that I was ever in. And I never once studied for spelling bees. I just looked at a word and I knew how to spell it, And I feel like some of those talents I was able to apply to build more skills in numerology. And, like for me, it just captivated my interest. So I kept getting more and more into it without ever really knowing the destination too. And that's another strange thing about numerology, is that with a spoken language, how well you're speaking it. You can ask the fluent speakers and see where you're at. With numerology, no one really knows where you're at. You're not really knowing what you're learning or where it's taking you. But to me, that's kind of the most fascinating part about it. And, for me and my story, to have woken up to this, the matrix from the television first, and then look at my own life and see the numerology, I think it's an interesting story worth sharing. And I will ultimately write a book about like my journey, because when it comes to like teaching the numerology and stuff, I think there are some things relevant to astrology and the eclipse code that haven't been properly like laid out and documented that I would like to get around to. But ultimately, like, I kind of almost want to write a pseudo fiction about my story, maybe like exaggerate it a little bit, but just waking up to what I was seeing and how I realized, whoa, like this is way deeper than I thought. And honestly, for me to find something like this that has captivated me so much, I could have never dreamed of that. 5-6 years ago, I just thought I'd be working and being bored the rest of my life, not really knowing what to go after. And then I found this, and it's like, wow, not only do I get to learn more, but fortunately, I came along into it early. So, my audience for it is pretty large, and I get to share it with a lot of people at this point. So it's all been pretty cool, pretty magical. And I've always felt like there was a certain magic to life, but I just never had a proper way of explaining it to people. I didn't want to be a preacher. Like, I was always more or less a Christian. And the astrotheology of it, of course, that's a big thing. But the spirit of Jesus, like there's something strong about that. It's encapsulated in these ancient religions and even the modern ones as well.
Yeah, I follow Bill Donahue. I'm going to call him out right now, and I recommend him to anybody, and not the evangelist. He's actually a guy right from my backyard here in Jersey. He's from Forked River, and Santos Bonacci and people like him have totally, and by the way, I was the guy on your live stream talking Santos. I think he called me out. But
he's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bill Donahue has what you're talking about with the spirit of Jesus and how then the Christ and what it means. And it's fascinating when you really understand the anatomical and astronomical relevances to Jesus and the many sun gods. and that connection, and actually what led me to numerology, the little bit that I know, was understanding the astrotheology. It's actually what caught my attention. And I guess that's my point with giving people like something to be excited about. Meaning, if you just say the Jesuits and the Masons, and that we all know for years on end that that's been a thing, and they know it's a thing, but a lot of people, I just think, hit a brick wall and they start mocking it because they don't understand past it. But understanding and getting excited about certain things like, the Bible, and understanding that there's a deeper meaning and it's not just a literal story and all this other stuff, and that it's coded in numbers, I think is important. And of course, man, like your work should be, I told you, should be watched more. I'm pretty sure you're close to 10,000 hours from scoping out your page. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, maybe I am. I don't know. I haven't run the numbers yet, but you think I would. But but like, when it comes to spirituality and all that, like I had a very strong spiritual experience when I was young, and the people around me, a lot of them were involved in the church, but none of what they were doing drew me in at all. They're like, they're debating things from the Bible, stories, whether or not certain gifts still exist. I'm like, who cares? Like in my deep down, like this wasn't just a childish, like, I'm young. I'm like, I don't care about that. Like it doesn't mean much to me. Like you're just going back and forth. There's nothing concrete about it. Who knows? You don't know if anybody lived back then. You don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Gio. You haven't talked for a while.
Yeah, no, us Gemini's been taking over the conversation.
No, it's all good. I like it. I'm a very observant person, so it's all good. But like I grew up very Christian as well, and like it was very much so because of my mom. I mean, yeah, my whole family was all Christian and everything, but that was something for me too. It was just like I understood it and I believed it and everything, but there was more of a feeling that came with it. And I got to say, like, I'm thankful for how my mom had brought me into it, because she was always very much that it's a faith. It's not a religion. It's not about like this whole thing. Like she wasn't about the indoctrinated beliefs and stuff. And that's why I followed that mostly. And then coming across like all this different occult knowledge and everything, that's what really drew me in, because it felt like there was more explanation to the things that I believed. And like, it was also, because any time that it would come up in conversation, like you talk to somebody about anything spiritual or religious in some sort of way, people be turned off by it right away. And like my thing was always so much to be like, how can you get somebody to listen and kind of understand the faith-based side of it, of being like, okay, like it's not just this woo-woo man in the sky personified shit all the time. Like, it's like, what can really do that? And I felt like going into this occult knowledge and understanding these things like even gematria, the astrology, everything, and understanding the history of things, I feel like this is a great way to actually bridge the gap for these people that are so turned off by even just the terminology. Like, you mentioned God right away, someone's gonna like roll their eyes at you or something, or saying Jesus and stuff. So like, that's why the whole thing of you saying the whole pseudo, like, trying to do something more of like almost like a pseudoscience thing and stuff. I think that's also a great way, is to almost hide the teaching of, let's just say, if you do a book on gematria, like really hide the teaching in some sort of like fiction, but it's not really fiction. It's actually true. It's just the delivery of the story of it, how it's fashioned, is just more in like fictional character based or something like that. That's a great way to go about it. And that's the thing. I think that's with all these different communities, as far whether it's astrological, the numerology community, different types of all these occult communities. It's like coming back to that way. And that's why even we've tried to on the podcast to put it that way. And like with certain things, especially when explaining astrology, because there's a lot of people just like, oh, astrology, like you think that the stars rule things and stuff, and it's like, no, it's actually a lot deeper and more complex than that.
Right. One comment I get sometimes is like I'll mention astrology, right, and then like 60 seconds later, someone in the room will be on their phone and they'll be like, here's a study that's looked at 6,000 couples and they found no relation between astrology and the number of marriages. And I'm like, oh boy, like I wish I was that ignorant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it was so simple.
I think we actually talked about that on our Science of Astrology episode, where we had talked about Carl Jung's statistics. And there was actually a conspiracy where that was skewed by another guy. So like when you really go into it, if anything, the statistics actually speak for it. And that's what that half the episode was about, quantum physics and you know, how the ether, and we're entering the age of Aquarius, which we're obviously understanding the ether and the ethernet and the internet and all that stuff and connecting, because Aquarians communities and stuff. But the thing is like we're finding these definitely these deeper connections with all the astrology has its facts. And the thing is I believe this too, because you always mention consciousness and frequency. I think if you actually have a belief system and that's vibrating at a frequency, like let's say you go, astrology is bullshit. Well, the universe always says yes to you. So you're actually going to find all of the things that say astrology is bullshit. So if you cut yourself off from the truth thinking it's already a lie, you're going to actually find and manifest all of the things that do support your fact that it's a lie. But when it comes down to it, nature is nature and the patterns speak. It's why it's gematria and numbers and everything is so important, because I think the truth lies in with the patterns of the Fibonacci, the patterns of the 12 and the 12 months and the 12 musical scales and the 12 everything. Numbers are the language of God. And then the numbers line up with the planets, and everything always comes back to energy, frequency, vibration, which are what? Numbers, measured in numbers. So
at the most basic level, when you look at the solar system and the geometry of the planets inside it and how it's related to the golden ratio, and you find pi in the orbits, it's just phenomenal, that alone. And then you realize, is that just the macro? You know, we're more of a micro, the cells in our body even more so. But just to finish off the thing on religion, I guess, like, I always wanted to spread the word, right? And I was always creeped out because my boss, she was like, she was really strong into it. She would speak in tongues during prayer in the back, and just really strong Christian and great woman. And she would like stop me once while I was talking. She'd be like, "You're a prophet." I'm like, "Whoa, back off, lady." Like, I don't know what that is, you know, but I'm like, I did find that as I grew up, like, I had this urge to share my experience with people. Like, hey, like, I was in a room full of people. We asked for the spirit of Jesus for whoever needed it. And I was like, all right, like, I don't know what I'm doing in life. I was only 16 at the time, but, you know, I was at a point where I was just kind of like looking for something more. And it hit me, man. And it hit me like a freaking billy club right in the chest.
That feeling Gio's talking about.
Yeah.
Like the point where I was teared up when I opened my eyes. They're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, something hit me. I don't know. They're like, oh yeah, that's the Holy Spirit, you know. And whether the Holy Spirit is a word for it or a term, however you look at it, I have no doubt that is a reality that exists. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what happened that day, but something got inside me. It started to build a fire as I grew older. I didn't know what that was. And, you know, when I was younger, you know, those years just working, and I still work, but it's, you know, it's a different situation now. And I feel like I kind of got to contribute to, like, I don't want to do this all day. I really don't. But like, you know, it was tough because I knew there was more, and I always hated school so much when I was younger. Like, I was good up until 3rd grade, and then suddenly, like a switch, I just hated school. I never did homework anymore.
Knew it was pointless.
Yeah, something hit me hard where I was like, I'm done learning anything. Like, I haven't learned anything. I've learned basic tables. I got that. Now what? So for 7-8 years, I was stuck in the school system, just miserable. And I had my friends, and, you know, I wasn't like that lost as a child, but boy, I had no idea what I wanted to do. No clue where I was going, and just kind of was a drifter until, well, I guess I still am, but I found this stuff and I realized, hey, I can contribute because these skills I had built up in programming, you know, because I realized that if I learned programming, I could probably get a pretty good job within GE. So I redesigned a supply chain. They loved it. They ended up hiring me on, even though I had no college education. So if people are, you know, into coding at all, get into it because you'll always have a job. That's what I say. But yeah, like, you know, I was able to build this website, and the Excel file is where it all started. And I guess this will tie back into, you know, my story about awakening, but you know, it was the perfect storm, you know, for Zach to be teaching it and him just talking about the numbers with that shitty old calculator he had. It was good, and people who were especially attentive could get it. But all of a sudden you throw that visual on there, and all it took was a couple months before that combination got deleted on the internet. So, you know, I see it as like me and Zach were kind of, you know, whoever the creator is and whatever he's doing up there, you know, he cut a piece of cloth, and he had me and Zach as a piece of that cloth. I think a few of these other Gematria guys too. And I love everybody who's doing Gematria to some degree. I don't hate anybody who's doing it. I think some of them are very good, but that's like very small percentage. And when I look at it, it's like, to be honest, me and Zach are doing, I guess, the most digestible work. Maybe I like to think. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it,
I
but I mean,
would agree.
Yeah, it feels like there's like a root, like almost like a root explanation to kind of go back to in a way that there's really like a good stamp on it when it comes to it. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you guys are foundational, and you come from more of like a like when I watch you guys, I know you know what you're talking about, and I trust you. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of people in the truth community. I'm not going to watch someone I don't trust. I look at any video or any type of knowledge I intake. It's like the vibe of the teacher is going to affect my ability to retain it because I trust the person. Someone like, say, Zach, right? Very sometimes overwhelmingly like, I'm right, and that's cool. I'm a little different, but I do respect it because what I like about his vibe is he believes in what he's talking about. And that's what it takes. He even mentioned it in one of his live streams in the past. He had said, like, you have to be this way, like you guys made me this way in a sense because I have to be like, if I'm not arrogant or aggressive, guess what? I'm not going to get the point across. But I know a lot of people will see just that. But my point is he knows what he's talking about. It goes to the same thing with you. When you're doing your live streams and your videos, I totally trust you. And I think that you're coming from, you could back up everything you're talking about. I think there's many questions that are a little unanswered that I'd like to actually ask you too about specific things. I'll let you finish your story on the awakening process and all, but more so like, that's my point. It's the trust factor. It's the fact that you studied. I could tell you studied. I could tell you know what you're talking about, and you're not trying to make me believe something. You're just showing me.
Right. I guess that's what's cool about numerology is I found this palette, this untapped palette, or mostly untapped, where it's like, okay, I can share all these things and they're all provable. Like, I'm not into theories and ideas so much. Like, I like to explore them, but I'm not going to preach them. And with numerology, it's like, this ties perfectly into the whole spirituality thing. It's like, now I'm in a position where I feel like I can kind of prove that the spiritual realm exists to a certain degree, at least if you're conscious and aware enough to it and want to wake up to it. I can help accelerate that process by showing you your numerology. Like, every time someone contacts me for the first time and says, hey, can you run my numbers? I'll be like, okay, not only am I running your numbers, but I'm explaining to you why you contacted me on this date, right? Like, that's, and without fail, there's a riddle there. It's the most bizarre, crazy, but awesome thing. So it's like, I'm not going to stand at a podium and preach a sermon to anybody from Psalms, but I can kind of like, I can give you a rope and kind of lead you in that direction. I feel good about now where I have my niche and I'm tapped into it. I understand it. And, another reason why music kind of slowed down for me when I was younger is because the novelty of it wore off for me after a couple of years. Like, after, just working so hard producing, and I'm just like, it's not that it wasn't leading me anymore or anywhere, or I wasn't enjoying it. I just, like, I didn't really have a whole lot more to say, and it just wasn't drawing me in. But with this stuff, it's like, this is all kind of new. I mean, you have other people who were before me, but, we're all like, there's just so few of us, and we're all tapping into this massively, I think, important thing. And it's going to have various levels of importance to everybody, right? I mean, some people are not going to get it. Some people kind of think it's cool. Other people, like me, it transforms them, and I've been told that by others. I've gotten so many emails saying, like, thank you for your work. Like, it's helped me pull me out of depression. I'm like, wow. Like, so is this number therapy?
How do you think that, like, understanding and knowing, like knowing the gematria and stuff, how do you think that could be, like, beneficially applied to someone's life? Like, how would you approach that if somebody, like, was like, hey, like, how can I actually apply this to my life more so, rather than just maybe predictive things and all that?
Right. Yeah, I would say that's like top 3 questions I get probably is like, hey, what's the good side of it? Because there is a good side of it. And I do struggle with that, because it seems like, the part of numerology I'm exposing is that people are using this as a form of mind control, which is evil, right? They're trying to make us believe and fear things that aren't real. And that, to me, is a form of evil. It's darkness. It's dropping the vibration. I guess that's the definition of it, more or less. So, okay, so are we, what's the opposite of that? Are we supposed to apply numerology to our own lives? Maybe let's say, okay, I'm going to start a project, but I want to take a vacation first. And a lot of people say, hey, screw the New Year's resolution, just do it now, do it immediately, right? But maybe there's some relevance to waiting to the right date. One of my favorite stories about that is after I spoke at a conference back in 2019, back in Philadelphia. I was out on the East Coast there. And one of the guys at the conference hooked me up with a little extra so I had never done DMT before. And I always thought I would do it when I was 37 because in Gematria, DMT is 37 in ordinal, right? So I looked way out ahead and I had a little date picked out that lined up with my numerology. I was like, I think I'm going to try to aim for that date. Well, then I ended up with this stuff and I told my friend about it. He's like, oh, do you have enough? And I said, yeah, absolutely. We can both try this. And it was right around it was like just a few days before his 35th birthday. And I realized the number 35 has matching gematria with like dimethyltryptamine or something. And then I dug deeper into the date and I realized, whoa, this date is actually better. So we ended up smoking DMT by the numbers.
Wow.
And yeah, and I don't talk about drugs a whole lot because I'm not really into them. But if people want to try them, I think they can teach you some things, or at least put you in a state of mind where you're more receptive to lessons.
Yeah, I think they vibrate at a frequency, and I feel like with someone like me who smoked a lot of weed when I was younger, I actually can't because I actually feel like it lowers my vibration. And I'm not putting myself above anything or any plan or anybody, but all I'm saying is I feel like when you get to a certain state of mind or state of consciousness and you vibrate at a certain level, all these plants do vibrate. And the ones that, like DMT and psilocybin and all those, I think they're just very divinely vibrating up high, and they take you into another realm and dimension. And yeah, of course, they're teachers. I believe that. I think they teach you states of consciousness and states of mind.
Yeah. Sure. And so finally I got into numerology in like late 2015 or 2016, I think. And again, this was after I'm waking up to all these false flag shootings and stuff. So as I'm looking on YouTube, I'm coming across channels like, I don't know, Jeff C. and
God rest
the
his
Vengeful, and the Vengeful Christian, and like Red Silver J was another one. They're all doing these false flag shootings videos, and every time there's a news story, they'll pick the interviews apart. They'll look at the symbolism, the scenery. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of interesting. And then there was this one guy, Zachary K. Hubbard, who was doing something completely different, just sharing his screen and talking about numbers. I'm like, what in the world is this? But there was something about it. It wasn't produced at all. Like, again, it didn't feel like he was trying to make me believe something. And so I kind of paid attention to it, and I was kind of annoyed by it at first because I'm like, okay, like the reason it annoyed me is number one, if this is nonsense, which I think it might be at the time, then this is just clouding up the truth community. This is going to distract people. This is going to make us look crazy. This isn't good. And then I thought the other side of it was like, damn, this is so simple that if it is true, I'm going to feel really stupid for not knowing about this. I didn't even know the word gematria, for God's sake. And so it just didn't settle well with me, and I realized like he would talk about the number 47, and then I see like 2 articles the next day with the number 47 in the headline. And I'm like,
universe talking.
I was like, that's kind of weird. And then, I keep poking in on his blog, and I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I see he's measuring some people's birthdays. I'm like, that's crazy. But I'm paying attention to it, and finally, okay, I was into fantasy football at the time. And I had the craziest fantasy football spreadsheet you've ever seen. Like, nobody would top this shit. It was better than any of the internet tools. I just made my own. I wanted to see things in my own way. And I started to realize some weird synchronicities with numbers. And I remember in October of 2016, I noticed that like 9 or 10 players who wear the number 13 in the NFL had either 13 or 130 receiving yards in the same day. And that was the same day that I told my friend there's something up with the number 13 before I even found out about all this. Because I'm listening to the radio, on NFL radio, and they're like, oh, a 91-yard drive, that'll be his 99th touchdown pass of his career. And these are all numbers related to 13. He's not saying 13, but numbers connected to 13. I'm like, I can't shake it. So I go in, and we were playing golf that day with my buddy, and I go into the clubhouse and I look up to the TV, and there's number 13 for the Eagles. catches a punch, runs it back for a touchdown. I'm like, what the fuck, number 13? So I go back out and I actually tell my friend, like, this is before I was into numbers big. I was like, dude, something's up with the number 13 today. And he's like, all right. Well, then about half hour later, I get a news alert on my phone, and it says 13 dead, 31 injured in bus crash in California.
Mirror.
And I'm like, on my smartphone. So I showed him the story. I was like, dude, look at this alert, 13 dead. And he's just like, whoa. So he kind of got interested, but he's got other things going on. But for me, that blew my fucking mind, especially when I came home and realized all these players wearing number 13 had 13 yards, 13 catches, 130 yards. I was like, okay, it's on.
I have a question about that too. So I know a lot of, like, say with the past Super Bowl, and this more comes from one of Zach's videos. When you get things like 201 yards, right? And I understand that's a big Jesuit number, and all of those little stats repeat, or let's say like birthdays that were back in the 60s lined up with today. Don't you think that would be more part of the organic, or do you think that maybe this dark cabal uses black magic and manifests these things and manifests these numbers? Because to have someone try and throw 201 yards in a game and to land on that number, I mean,
oh my God, dude. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I don't know. I struggle with how much is rigged and how much is done, because
right.
I feel certain that there's an element of rigging going on in these, especially when you get to the championship games. Like it seems undeniable to me at this point, especially. So I don't think that's arguable, but how much is? And what I realize is that, when people engage in an activity and work towards something together with a common goal, and then there's these rules that exist in their head, something goes on at a deeper level that, we talk about being connected on a quantum level. And there's some vibrations going on in a real deep level that manifests numbers. Okay.
Agreed.
And I can give an example of this later. It's weird, but so my idea is that if they have certain numbers in mind when they set up these rituals, other things could absolutely just happen to manifest left and right. Like, you keep repeating this number over and over. Maybe that's all it takes. So it's tough because, sometimes you watch a game, and like in the Super Bowl even too this year, it was 31-9. So it was garbage time at the end of the game. But you still see these little random rinky-dink plays, and the guy runs out of bounds at a certain yard line. And I'm thinking, okay, like they're finalizing their statistics to make sure they get the numbers. I feel like I see some of that going on, especially in the big games. And, maybe that's worth like an analysis, someone sitting down and looking at these things and saying, hey, like, how rigged is this? Because I watch a lot of NFL games, during the regular season, and you'll be watching like a Panthers Jaguars game or whatever, and it's at the last second, and the guy could score the winning touchdown, but the guy gets his fingertip on the ball and it goes out of bounds and there's no time left, and it's like, well, that could have gone either way, and that was a legit play. Like, you can't rig him getting his fingertips on it.
Yeah. And I think that's my big point with, like, if you're trying to push the rigging thing, I think a lot of people I know have gotten turned off because they're like, dude, no way. And then it actually turns them off on the whole subject, because now it's like they have that locked in their subconscious, like, oh, well, the coincidences and things that whatever. And like, I have one buddy who specifically says, like, dude, you can't rig a football game like that. And I do agree that there's maybe at a certain part of a game or whatever, and they know. But the thing is, there's so many people. You have the coaches, you have the players, you have all these guys go to college and they go up to get into the NFL to play a game of Gematria for the Dark Cabal. And that's my point. I like, if I were to believe it, and I'm not going to deny it. Of course I believe it, but I also think that there's a way to, like, maybe it's something to do with what you're talking about with, like, more of the quantum level of things and more of a black magic. I'm not going to say just black magic, but like something that's affecting the ether, because that's where we lose people. I think we lose people at the whole, it's all rigged. We have to watch our boundaries with that. Now, if we want more people to follow and listen to knowledge like this.
That other part, is that like kind of what you say about the whole fact that numerology manifests naturally without human conscious intervention, and that like everything has already happened? Like, is that like the other side of it rather than just the actual rigging? Like, are they understanding maybe some of these patterns and understand that has its own frequency and are finding a way to tap into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, honestly. I really do. I mean, if I'm to put money down, I don't claim to know anything. I'm not asking anyone to believe it, but if I had to put money down on what's happening, I think that's it, man. And you know what I've never heard anybody in the community talk about in relation to all of this is Aleister Crowley's sex magic, right? Think about it. Like, how is it, like, could it be possible that by these rituals, people are getting together, they're conceiving, and then a child is born by the numbers based on what that magic ritual was for? What the hell is sex magic for if it's not for having babies by the numbers?
That's what right. Like, and that sounds crazy, but when you really go with, so in the deeper side of the occult, this is a thing. And if you know Aleister Crowley, you're exactly right. The guy used a lot of sex magic. I know all about it because I'm like a book freak and I've gotten everything. I found some of his books on eBay and only because I, as a Gemini, you would relate, I like to literally dive into anything that interests me. So I did dive into that. And like by doing rituals, people don't believe in, they think it's witch and whatever and movies and stuff, but that's how they get you. They put it in movies and they get you to think, oh, it's not possible.
It's program. It's this programming. The same thing the way they do with, just the whole concept of even aliens. That's what turns people off. I mean, I think more people come around to it now and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is all interesting because, I guess when it comes to sports and I guess some news stories in general, like there's an organic side to things. And that is kind of what led to a little bit of a falling out between me and Zach. I used to be on the Gematria Effect Hall, quite regularly. And ultimately it's like, there was a story about a coach in Syracuse. I remember this on the air. It was in February of 2019. And the coach hit a guy on the freeway while driving home. There was an accident on the freeway. Somebody was trying to get back to their car, and the coach of the team swerved around and hit him, and the guy died. And one of my subscribers, who I had seen comment maybe once or twice on my channel, a long time ago, he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I saw your post on Jim Boeheim. Just so you know, I'm friends with the guy who passed away, his neighbor. I'm friends with the guy's neighbor, and he's really dead. This really happened." And, his family and friends were with him, just like the news story said. And nobody's questioning the story, And I'm like, wow, that's pretty wild, And it turns out he contacted me by the numbers. I learned about the Wizard of Oz, and it was all tied in together. He passed from Syracuse, but that's a long story. Holy crap. So anyway, I'm on the air with Zach, and I have this information, and I'm like, and Zach's like, oh, another, ritual sacrifice, murder or whatever. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. This was on the freeway. If they were going to stage this, would it be on the freeway like this in this spot during a winter storm? It doesn't add up. He's like, I don't want people to think they're not getting murdered. And I'm like, oh, whoa. We're not doing this. No.
Yeah. And it's not to interrupt, but he's passionate because it all comes from a good place. And I see that. So
I get it.
Anytime someone speaks his name, I know he gets, and he admitted, dude, I'm like that because of the way this
sometimes misdirected.
Right. I think that's really it. And I just, if he ever hears this, I think really it's important to think of the people. I get that you might think they're stupid, and okay, we get it. But there's some people that need just a little more proof, and something like that to say immediately that it's a ritual. Instead of calling everything a ritual sacrifice, if you want more listeners and we want more people in this community, I feel it's just to be more subtle and to explain the coincidences of the numbers and what it potentially could be. To call things something when you don't know what you might know the code, and you might see the fact that it's connected to deeper parts of the matrix and all. It's still and I'm only from experience, certain people get turned off to think everything is a ritual sacrifice. It actually takes out the ability to see it as the universe being connected, and there's this deeper thing like magic and all that existing in the first place. So I find it's just really important, and it's not, like I said, it's not bashing his stuff or anything like that. It's actually for the good. It's for the good. I support all of this 150,000%. So. I might have lost him for a sec.
Ray's frozen on the screen. Oh no,
there you go. Yeah, you're back. We were all frozen.
Right on.
All right.
Yeah. So and I'm not one for fantastical claims, which is why I built the calculator. And then I'm looking deeper, and I'm like, okay, not only is he right about this, but there's all this other stuff I want to talk about now too. And I kind of ceased, like I was going to work on the website and make it really good, but I got so into decoding and this new stuff I was learning, I just couldn't stop. Here I am today. But yeah, like to me, you know, claiming this was a sacrifice just based on the fact that, you know, you have a couple number alignments. They were good alignments, but it was just a couple of them. Like to me, that's a fantastical claim now. So I just had to challenge it. And yeah, God bless him. I mean, he got upset and I was kind of like that. So I realized, you know, look, I'm not going to waste a lot of energy or spend a lot of energy trying to convince Zach that this is true or whatever, because, you know, again, like he has so much influence and rightfully so. I mean, for the way he speaks and talks about it, but
he's amazing. We'll say it one more time.
Right on.
He's really good at what he does. So you gotta, you know, it even goes for superstars, man. Sometimes there's a superstar out there, comes off a little arrogance and knows he's the best and da-da-da. And
I hear you.
People still admire greatness, you know? And the thing is, I'm telling you, man, you deserve the homage too. You deserve the only because all the hard work, you know?
Yeah. Personally, I it's like, I get it and I get where he's coming from too. But like, for me personally, like, that's the thing. Like, I get turned off by that. Like I get turned off by the arrogant stuff and everything and stuff. And like, that's why I like watching, you know, I'm like, I feel like that's the way it should be approached more. You know, I'm more susceptible to sitting there and listening more so about how you go about it rather than him. Nothing against him, but that's just my personal take. And I feel like there is a lot of people that maybe may feel like that too, though.
Yeah. He does preach that he wants all of us to come together too. Yeah. It's going to take dropping that just a tiny bit,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're all molding something, you know,
we are.
So I don't know what the right approach is or whose is the best, and maybe none is, but
no one's wrong. No.
Yeah. I don't see anyone that's wrong. And by the way, you know, I don't want to throw shade at other Gematria guys too. Like some of the classic ones. I'm one of the biggest Dan Barrett fans in the world. Him and like Chigozi Truth. These guys are great. And you know, they know their stuff. They might be interested in slightly different things. Like for Dan, it's mostly about the organic matrix, and his life is a trip. And his posts are ultimately kind of what led me to accept that all this is real. Like I read a post of his from several years ago claiming that the death of his uncle was connected to the Jesuit order and some stuff. And I'm like, that's so odd. Like, why would he say that? But his work is interesting, you know? And then here I am in 2021, and I made a post talking about how Dustin Diamond dying from cancer. Dustin Diamond was from Port Washington, and that's up a little bit north of where I'm from. Well, in 2014, my uncle died of cancer, and he lived in Port Washington his whole life. And Dustin Diamond died just 2 weeks after another uncle of mine died of COVID, or whatever COVID is. And so I was like at a time where I'm looking for answers and really lost about things, because I literally predicted the day that the uncle was going to pass away in the hospital. You know, they sent him in like around the 10th. And I was like, it wasn't until they said, oh, we're going to put him on a ventilator. And I'm like, oh no, a ventilator. I tried to raise a stink about it, but that doesn't get far. So, you know, I'm looking ahead in dates, and I'm like, December 21st, man, it's got his name Gematria. That's what ritual sacrifice is. And then he ended up dying on that date. It was like a blood fungus or something. I don't know, man. It was wild.
That's really weird, because my coworker, actually, his uncle just he had COVID, and he ended up going into the hospital with pneumonia, and they ended up having to put him on a ventilator. And it was like 50% that the ventilator was breathing for him and 50% himself. And then he got to a certain point where he was 90% breathing on his own, but they didn't take him off the ventilator. And then he ended up developing some sort of sepsis and died from that. So it's like, it's so crazy. Is that the same, the video you're talking about that you did on that? Is that the same one where you talk about the pro wrestler Kamala and the Kamala Harris and that one?
Yeah, that was around the same time. Yeah. I think I was using the number 73 as an example.
Yeah. And also with the Great Conjunction.
Exactly. He died. Yeah. It was the date of the Great Conjunction too. And wow. Saturn is 73, Ronald Bear is 73, Ronald Arvin Bear is 73. So it was very difficult for me to digest, because here, now it's my own family. I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking ahead. It happens. And it doesn't seem natural, right? I mean, if he went into the hospital, he wouldn't have died of a fucking blood fungus. You know, he was having, here's the thing too, right? Okay. We have to look at this from all angles. So it's not like they diagnosed him with COVID and kidnapped him and pulled him into the hospital. Okay. Like He was having trouble breathing. He went to the hospital. He got a positive diagnosis. They sent him back home. He was back home. He started having more trouble breathing. And he said, you know what? I don't know. I think I got to go to the hospital. So they kept him there. So, I don't want to make it seem like it was one thing when I don't know. Like I say, the world is energy, right? It's all destined to happen, whatever. But it still freaked me out. And for that synchronicity in the media to occur related to the death of my other uncle, the only other uncle I've had who died, it's like, this world is insane. And I can't, no matter what I do, no matter how far I go, it just gets crazier and crazier. It really does. I mean, the synchronicities, it feels like they amp up. And again, maybe I'm just noticing them better or whatever, but even my friends text me by the numbers now. It's crazy.
Well, I think the whole 2012 marker, because I follow David Palmer, the Leo King. He's a really good astrologer. He has a app, High Vibe Network, daily horoscopes, and he does weekly deep astrology. He's been preaching that since 2017 up to like 2025. And with the way the astrology is we're going to be experiencing some sort of spiritual, like we went through our dark night of the soul following 2012. And then we were at this point where more people are going to wake up in the age of Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, who is the awakener. I just think once you open the door a little bit and you allow your consciousness to see through the veil, the synchronicities kick up because your frequency is rising. And I think you've now entered a new, level of consciousness. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It's the fact that you already walked through the door with us. Same thing. Sure. And you ever notice on certain days, synchronicities are stronger than others. And I think those are the days, whether it's astrology, whether it's the numbers, or both of them are working together and telling us. It's just, I sense those days intuitively. I don't need no numbers or stars. I could see where it's like you were saying, this number keeps popping up. This thing, there's something keeps popping up constantly. And I think really it's a consciousness thing. It's that field is talking to you. And the way to read the field is through what you do and what the astrologers do and all the occult is understanding the ether. And it's just about accepting it and being aware of it, that you'll see more of it. People that don't experience synchronicity are the ones that don't believe in it. So,
So today's date, 23/3. If you go into my calculator and you type into what I consider the most significant Gematria cipher, which is called Jewish or Latin Gematria, the word Gematria equals 233. So today's visit, even by the numbers. And my Saturn, when I was born, my Saturn was at 233 degrees. My sun was at 74 degrees by the end of the day anyway. And Gematria is 74 in the English alphabet. So, yeah, it's crazy. And on that topic,
I was going to ask you to do that, by the way. Before we had started, before we started the talk, Gio goes, I'm going to ask him if he could code this talk. And I was like, I don't know if he could do that. You just did it.
No, I'm all over it. Yeah.
Wow.
That's perfect.
On the topic of energy too, I'm a believer that there's something wild going on with the tarot decks. I don't know how deep you guys have gotten into it.
I know, that's so funny because I actually was very curious about that. All
right. So I haven't drawn a card in a long time, probably like 2 or 3 months. And I just drew one card. And as I was shuffling, I thought, okay, make it obvious which card it should be, right? You got to leave it up to whatever's going on around you. So I was just boom, 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 and I'm shuffling the cards, and then one fell back. And I didn't see it when it fell. And I'm like, that's it. And I pulled it, and it was this one, which is the Page of Swords, which represents new ideas, low emotional intimacy, which is a point in my life where I'm at right now.
Same.
But strong intellectual relationship. I was trying to explain this to my dad. I've been in relationships and I've dated recently and stuff, and that's great. But man, there's something amazing going on, and I'm a part of it. And I'll be damned. It's it's the thing that I never thought I could even discover. So it's life just takes you in all directions. You never know. This all happened, by the way, to the 2015 awakening that I had. That was right after my Saturn return. So it was like Saturn came back to 233. It was like, okay, time for Gematria, and here we are on the date. But yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. And oops, sorry.
Oh wait, I kept seeing. What I saw? I think in the past few days, I've seen 322, and I thought that was isn't that the Masonry number?
Well, yeah, skull. So Masonic equals 223. So does skull and crossbones, and then the skull and bones logo has 322 on it. which is the reverse of 223.
Which is today. Well, no, 323. But
Yeah.
you know, it's close.
Close. Yeah. My buddy Chance, who I've done interviews with too, he was born on the spring solstice, March 21st. So I forgot to wish him a happy birthday, but I got to do that.
Happy birthday. What was his name?
That's Chance over at Innerverse Podcast.
Dude, that's so crazy. I just fell upon that. Yeah, dude. I don't know where I saw it, but I did. Innerverse Podcast. I'm going to literally look right now. I'm pretty sure I had saved it because there was a talk on, what was it? It was something on the year of the White Wizard, I think. Maybe it's not his, but I know I saw the Innerverse Podcast.
Well, I have 2 interviews with Chance at that show, and the second one especially is really good. It flows real well. We both have, I think we have this. We have the same reverse gematria, he and I. So like, the transitions are like flawless. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm looking. I got it. I download everything. No, it's the word Innerverse is in this page. That's all. That's the irony. And it was the year of the White Wizard mapping galactic synchronicities. And I keep hearing things about the Mayan calendar. I know that's important with numbers too, because they use the whole 260 day, 26 God, all that's big connection with that calendar. But I was searching last night, and that was a big thing that kept popping up. And it's called the Innerverse Podcast. So there's 2 of them.
Right on.
This is a lady, Heather Elizabeth.
Well, is she just a guest?
Potentially. I didn't even open the. I'm gonna open it up real quick and see.
Well, why are you glancing at that?
Gio, you're looking. You know what? I'm gonna screen share real quick. Now, this was not planned. Hold on. Share screen. Desktop.
No, this is Chance. Yeah,
that is.
Yep.
There you go. Yep. I usually there was a lot of videos that have disappeared from me over time, so I have a YouTube downloader. And I literally just grab whatever I can.
Excellent. Yeah, well, check them out. Check out the interview with me. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I'll watch it definitely.
So yeah, I mean, we're talking about numbers as a vibrational form at the deepest level, and it's like, how crazy do we want to get with the synchronicities, right? How far do we want to go? And I think at the most deepest level, like, one thing I'm worried about technology, and it's not like this AI stuff necessarily that I'm worried about, but just the presence of so much electricity and electromagnetism around us. I wear a couple of different pendants all day, and I sleep next to pyramids.
Oregon pyramids?
Yeah, one Oregon, one Shungite. And since I began using those, I started to dream again. Like, I couldn't dream before that. Okay, so
you can't see it.
I can kind of see it. Oh, there it is. Yeah,
got mine
little
too.
Tiny one. Excellent. You guys are spot on. Okay,
we're on the same level, man.
Yeah, so
same frequency.
So I don't think people understand really, though, the depth to which, and this is I say I'm not into theories, but the theories that I do have are built on observation, right? And I like to think I have good observational skills, else, my riddles and stuff, my videos wouldn't be as good. So I realized over the past few years, throughout this stuff, that there's something very deep about this electrical connection to our consciousness, and it's a little freaky, and I don't really talk about it very often. I know I've never talked about it on my channel, but there was one time specifically where, I did maybe talk about it a little bit, because I was mentioning certain numbers on my video that I was teaching about, and then I would get a phone call from those numbers. And as an example, the numbers one time were like 147, and then it was like 2 different 2-digit numbers. But I got a phone call from a phone number that started with 147. Well, that shouldn't even be possible. That's, a 1 is an area code dial. So I'm like, what is this? And I put the phone up, like, these are the numbers I'm talking about in this video. Someone messing with me, So then the next day, I remember I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, well, I was playing Rocket League at the time. This will make sense in a second.
Hell yeah.
It's the last video game I still play. It's probably the best game ever, but whatever. And I'm sitting here playing, and I'm thinking to myself, you play it through a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I play a little.
Okay, all right, right
Yep.
on. So I'm sitting here, and I'm thinking, man, that was so freaking weird when that number called me earlier. What are the odds that it happens? Like, wow, that's so strange. And I shit you not, like, that was the first time I thought about it in all day. 5 seconds later, I get a call from that same number again. And I was like, oh, okay, stop it. I ignore it. It's like, okay, creepy number, reading my mind, haha. So then the next day, right? And it's like 10 o'clock at night, a couple games of Rocket League I'm playing, maybe like 4 or 5 or 10, I don't know. But anyways, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, that was so weird yesterday when that number called me after I thought about it. And I'm thinking, like, my mind just wanders sometimes. And I thought, how come it's never a random number? It's always a number I've been paying attention to or belongs to someone I know. And I shit you not, dude. 10 seconds later, I get a phone call from a 9-digit phone number. And there were no dashes or anything. It was just 9 random numbers.
What?
And I rarely get spooked out by numerology sometimes, but there are things that have spooked me out. And that gave me chills. I'm freaking out. I'm like, really? I've been talking to myself